Let me tell you how reCAPTCHA is a complete scam. And if you don't know what reCAPTCHA is, I'm not sure why you clicked on this video, but it's those annoying little tests that pop up on websites to detect if you're a robot. The term CAPTCHA was first coined in 2003, and it's actually an acronym that stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart. Sometimes you can just tell when they came up with the acronym before the actual name. The original purpose of CAPTCHAs was to do things like preventing bots from making email accounts in the early 2000s. But that was a simpler time, when everyone was busy buying iPods and watching American Idol. Back then, a basic text-based CAPTCHA would do the job. But when the bots got more advanced, so too did the CAPTCHAs. And that was when everything went wrong. In 2007, a man named Luis von Ahn, who had worked on the team that invented the original CAPTCHAs, invented reCAPTCHA, in an effort to reCAPTCHA the human spirit. Actually, he added the re because the goal was to reuse the data from the CAPTCHAs on something else. Specifically, optical character recognition, which is the conversion of physically printed text into digital text. So let's say a machine is transcribing an old book. If it comes across a word that it can't quite read, the word would be sent to a reCAPTCHA, where humans would be asked to type the word to prove that they're not a robot. Unbeknownst to those humans, their efforts to prove their humanity might have also helped digitize an 18th century sex manual. If a human confirmed the machine's best guess for a word, or if enough humans agreed on what the word said, it would be sent back to the machine and put into the transcript. And just like that, Luis von Ahn had invented internet slavery. Okay, maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was unpaid labor. And it was such a success that the New York Times used reCAPTCHA to digitize their entire archive of 13 million articles from as early as 1851. The good news is that Luis von Ahn was doing this all for free. He wasn't charging companies to use the service, which helped keep the whole unpaid labor thing in a morally gray area. But things soon got worse, because in 2009, Google acquired reCAPTCHA, and they set their sights on bigger uses for the free labor. The company introduced reCAPTCHA v2, which would show you pictures of things on the street and ask you to identify something, either in several images or in certain parts of a larger image. And if you haven't figured it out already, this was being used to improve Google Street View on Google Maps and Google Earth. So now when a human proved they weren't a robot, they were also teaching a real robot what a bicycle looked like. But how much labor can a few seconds per CAPTCHA really contribute to? Well, a recent study from UC Irvine determined that over 13 years, humans had spent 819 million hours solving reCAPTCHAs, which adds up to a total of over $6.1 billion in wages. Although that's at a rate of $7.50 an hour, and we know they would have outsourced it to India before they paid that much. Now, regardless of how you feel about reCAPTCHA using you to transcribe the New York Times and identify a crosswalk, at least we can all take comfort in its ability to protect us from slightly more evil robots, right? Wrong, because it wasn't even doing that. By 2010, programs already existed that could solve image-based CAPTCHAs with 100% accuracy. And that was 2 years before Google introduced the image-based reCAPTCHAs where you tell them what a lamppost looks like. Even Google's own reverse image search was able to solve the CAPTCHAs consistently. I guess Google has so many projects going on at once that they didn't even realize that one department had already solved the problem that another department was using slave labor for. So not only was reCAPTCHA getting you to work for free, it also wasn't even providing a functional service in return. Thankfully, Google put all these concerns to rest by introducing reCAPTCHA v3, which totally eliminates both the text-based and image-based CAPTCHAs to bring you a riveting breakthrough in bot fighting technology. A box you can check telling them you're not a robot. Turns out that was all it took this whole time. Nobody thought to ask the bots if they were humans. But obviously the checkbox was more complicated than just that. Google claimed that v3 was based around behavior analysis, meaning that it would determine if someone was a bot based on how they interact with the website. And how exactly did they monitor such a thing? By tracking every single part of your online experience. Yes, it turns out the answer to website security is the complete surveillance of your data, which also happens to be a great way to make money on the internet, since that data can be sold to advertisers to help them target potential consumers. In other words, reCAPTCHA has essentially been turned into a data mining tool to create ad revenue. The way this works is that reCAPTCHA generates tracking cookies which monitor your activity on the internet, and use that to send the website a score for how trustworthy each user is. And if they also happen to sell the data from those cookies to make some extra cash, that's just the price of safety. It's kind of like if airport security was selling those full-body scans of people to department stores to help them make realistic mannequins. Which is not to say that that's not happening. The UC Irvine study estimates that since the data from a cookie is worth about $2.70, and reCAPTCHA has been used at least 329 billion times, it has potentially generated over $888 billion of value. It should be noted that Google kind of denies using the data like this, saying, reCAPTCHA user data is not used for any other purpose than to improve the reCAPTCHA service. Although what constitutes as improving the service is up to interpretation. Maybe them selling your data to Temu and reinvesting the money in the program is a necessary step to achieving reCAPTCHA v4. This time it exists entirely in your subconscious. But despite the extreme surveillance, at least this new version of reCAPTCHA is actually protecting the websites from bots, right? Wrong, it's still not doing that. In 2019, a bot using reinforcement learning was able to break reCAPTCHA v3's behavior test 97% of the time. So v3 is just as useless as its predecessor in protecting from bots, but even better at generating money for Google. And even though it's obsolete, reCAPTCHA v2 is still being used on almost 3 million websites. Some people have speculated that the data is now being used to help Google's autonomous vehicle service Waymo, although Google has denied this, even though it seems like Waymo might need the help. As for Luis von Ahn, the Oppenheimer of internet slavery, he went on to co-found Duolingo, creating in the process a more threatening bot than his CAPTCHAs could ever imagine. The newest version of reCAPTCHA v3 doesn't even show up as a checkbox. It just runs in the background of sites that use it. Can't have the people knowing that they're being protected, after all. And unfortunately, this isn't something that VPNs are designed to fight, which means there's nothing you can do about your data being exploited to protect you from bots. Well, 3% of them at least. The only good news is that if you've used reCAPTCHA over the years, you might one day make 17 cents in the inevitable class action lawsuit. Now please consider subscribing before I get demonetized for criticizing the owner of this website.